Welcome. My name is Lisa Taylor. This is Clipston Publishing Author Conversations, and today I get the privilege of speaking with Tim Coates, and he is the author of this beautiful book, The Secret Within. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous picture, by the way. When I look at it, I want to go towards the light in the beautiful caves. It looks so inviting and wonderful. So that, first of all, is a great choice, I think. How did that come about, by the way, to get the cover?
Well, my daughter and granddaughters live in Portland, Oregon, and that picture is taken at the entrance to a trail just about a half an hour outside of downtown Portland. In fact, in the last 3 months, my daughter took a picture with my granddaughter and I in front of that same scene. So now I have the book cover and I have a picture of my granddaughter and I there. So it's a beautiful, beautiful Oregon trail.
It really, really is. And finding the peace in hard times really describes what this book is going to be about. And I understand it's not a memoir. It's more of a book to help people, give them tools. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And in writing it, I struggled a little bit with how much of my personal story to tell because I wanted to tell enough to establish the cred, so to speak. But at the same time, the very last thing I wanted to do was to create a book about me. And so that was kind of the line I walked down. Enough, share enough so people can see where you're coming from. But again, everyone has their own challenges in life. And this book is designed and written to help them with their challenges.
Yeah, I 100% got that from reading it, but I guess we should just give a little bit of backstory.
Sure. Well, I was growing up, I'm a very driven person, a very planful person. I had wonderful parents who basically, pushed me and taught me. And so when I was 27, having gone through school and got degrees and graduate degrees, I had this modality where if I put my mind to something, I can accomplish absolutely anything. And I believed that my life was completely in my hands, that I controlled my destiny. And when our first son was born, he was born in a nurse midwife program. We were at the University of Minnesota. My wife had decided to go through, rather than a normal obstetrics-based care program, to a nurse midwife. And what happened was our first son was born with a severe physical disability. It's spina bifida. And specifically, it's the worst kind of spina bifida, which is myelomeningocele. And all of a sudden, my life changed. I mean, in a second, my life changed because I was used to, no matter how tough the challenge, if I put my mind to it and put my discipline to it, easy peasy. But here was a challenge and here was a change to our life that no amount of discipline or effort or wishing it was different was going to change. And it left me with a challenge that I never anticipated. And now I'm grateful for. It's a challenge that probably, I certainly didn't welcome, but it's a challenge with the perspective of 44 years later that was one of the greatest gifts of my life.
I understand that. I totally resonate with that. And I'm sure the people who need this book resonate with that as well, because what you're offering here is tools to help you get through these really tough moments in life and accept the fate that you have been handed, and that you still do have control of your life. I think you would agree with that. But the obstacle is the way in order to learn and grow, because that's what we're here to do, right? We're on this planet
Yeah.
to learn and grow.
Yeah.
So you do talk quite often about some of the challenges that you had in regards to all of the things your son had to go through, the surgeries, all of that the things. And there was a one point in the book, which was, I think, my favorite, where you discuss being in the hospital room and you had to stay with your son, and I think
Yeah.
you and your wife took turns or something like that, and it had to be completely dark, and you couldn't have lights, so you couldn't read, or you couldn't, I don't know if there was phones back then or not, but you literally just had to sit there in silence. Tell us a little bit about that. For me, I got chills when I read through that.
Yeah, it was an incredible period, an incredible difficult period. My wife, this is before cell phones, before laptop computers, before really any of the technology that we rely on today. And my wife, through kind of trial and error, had determined that our son was allergic to latex.
Right.
And he was in the hospital at the University of Minnesota. And doctors at the time didn't know that latex was a serious allergy, believe it or not. But my son was having very significant reactions. In fact, he went into cardiac arrest in one of his surgeries, and the doctors really didn't know why. So, long story short, the doctors started to believe my wife's pleadings that we think this is an allergic reaction to latex. So they put him in an isolation room in the center of the ICU, intensive care unit. And because he was, for a while, he was put into an induced coma, so everything could be very, very, very quiet and his body could heal. And my wife and I took turns, 12 hours a shift, being with him because we found out that when we were there, his care was better. We just didn't rely on caregivers. I mean, we were actively involved in his medical cares. And so picture this, you're in a room, it's very, very dark, and you're sitting in an uncomfortable, typically wooden chair for 12 hours straight. And the nurses minimized their traffic in and out because, again, they were trying to, create an environment for him that was both safe from airborne allergens from latex in the hospital, as well as giving him a chance to heal. And so, for the first hour, you're in there going, okay, and then the second hour and the third hour. And initially, thoughts would run through my mind, as they always do with our minds, right? Our
Yes.
minds always, always busy. And our minds are conjuring up worst case and best case and should have beens and could have beens. And after a while, I just became exhausted from all those thoughts. And I found myself not trying to do this, but doing it out of knowing no other way to be, but just relaxing into that moment. And this went on for days and days and days. I think he was in that isolation room for approximately 2 weeks. And, we just did these shift trade offs. And I think it was my first exposure to what is popularly known as mindfulness, where I just sat in presence. And the strange thing about it was, after a while, as devastating as our situation was, as worried as we were about our son, I almost grew to look forward to those sessions because it gave me the opportunity. I was a senior executive at the time to kind of unplug and just be, and rather than think and rather than be somewhere else in my thoughts, I was just present. And that was a great power. And it surfaced later in my life, and it surfaces through the practices I share in the book. But it was really my first exposure to deep presence.
It's I think most people would dread the thought of just sitting there for 12 hours with nothing to do. And this is kind of what society's looks like right now, doesn't it? We're all so addicted to our phones or our Netflix or having to have something going on. The thought of sitting for 12 hours in silence, and you say that you would look forward to it. Unplugging is so healthy for us. And it's something that people really need to learn to do. And you had to do it because you were in a situation, a scenario where it was best for your son. And you clearly, both of you, you and your wife, have done the utmost. And the fact that you are all connected as a family is beautiful. It's 100% exactly the way I think that it was supposed to be for you all. And just congratulations to you for doing that. All the things that you vulnerably share and courageously share in this book, people need to hear these things because I think today we have such a victim mindset as a society. And that was one of the things that really stood out for me was that you look at things from a positive perspective. And I was wondering if that's something that you've always had just innately. Was that the way that you were brought up? Or is this something that is learned? And how do we learn this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question that probably doesn't have a definitive answer. I think that certainly what we're born with does impact the way we are. So I think it was both maybe innate and learned in my case. What I found is this, and maybe this will help people visualize it, but the book in total is tries to give people a way to, I'm going to use a computer term, boot up into a new firmware. When you have an iPhone or an Android, every once in a while an update is sent out so your phone functions better and it's resilient to viruses. Well, I think we need something like that in life. And the firmware that we were born with is really our minds. Like when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm always shocked because when I look in the mirror, I see an old man. I'm going, I don't feel like an old
You're not old.
man. I don't feel like that. I mean, like, especially when I'm interacting with young people, I'll go back and I'll happen to look at myself in the mirror. I'm going, that's what they see. That's not me. And maybe other people feel the same way. I mean, none of us are as attractive as the magazine models say we should be, right? And so what we are, if you'd ask somebody, well, who are you really inside? And people will typically say, well, I guess I'm my thoughts, because my thoughts are always running in the background. And, even philosophers, I think, therefore I am, Rene Descartes, 300 years ago. But that's not really who we are. What I learned in the experience with my son is I used to think, and I don't mean this to sound overly egotistical, but I used to think that life was about me. And what I mean by that was that I was in control of my life. It was through my discipline and my planfulness and my goals that my life would be determined. And I found out through the birth of our son that wasn't the case. And slowly, it started to dawn on me that rather than life being about me, I'm about life. And that may sound like just a turn of a phrase, but it's much, much deeper than that. And what I try to help people with in the book is to boot up into a new software. And what that software is presence rather than thought. And I think presence is what the gift that I was given in that hospital ICU darkened room for a couple of weeks. But I discovered presence. Friends will say, well, I want to try meditating. Can you teach me how to meditate? I've meditated for 20 years. And I try to teach them to let go of thoughts. And they go, well, it's impossible. And to be sure, it's very, very hard. And I was kind of lucky. Rather than reading a book or listening to a podcast on meditation, I was forced to learn presence through no other option but to sit in a dark room for 12 hours.
Right.
But having had that experience, and having had that experience of presence, I find how powerful it is for helping us respond to everything in life, not just trauma and things we can't control, but to beautiful things, and to, just going for a walk in the morning and being present versus thinking about what you got to do later in the afternoon.
Okay, so who do you think this book is for then? Is it for the person who's going through a major trauma and doesn't know what to do? Or could it just be for the regular individual who's sort of living this mediocre life and wants what everybody wants? Happiness, joy, peace?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wrote it. My thought in writing it was the journey for me to find peace was very, very long. I mean, at first I thought I could find it through reading, what theologians and philosophers had to say. And I thought maybe I could invent a menu or a recipe so that I could find peace. And so if I turn the camera on, you can see bookshelves in my office here filled with, theology and philosophy. And what I found was that road was impassable. Um, uh, you can't read your way to peace. You have to be your way to peace. And so the first audience that I had in mind was people who are suffering some kind of trauma in their life. Maybe it's a personal medical situation, maybe it's an emotional situation, maybe it's a breakup, maybe it's a firing. I mean, there's so much trauma in life. And I wanted to help people, so that the trauma of their life doesn't become who they are. And in writing it, what I found and the comments I've had from friends who have read the book is that this is a book for everybody because we all live in our heads. And let's face it, we're our harshest critic. Just like me looking in the mirror and going, I'm not that old man in the mirror, you know? And so we're a harsh critic of ourselves. And if we can just let go of those thoughts and learn to let go of those thoughts, we start to discover the beauty of presence. And so what I do in the book is that rather than jumping into, okay, assume the lotus position and get your, fingers together, there's not many people that can read a book and do that. So what I start is very, very slow and in very, very easy ways that can be practiced throughout the day to slowly introduce someone to presence. And as they get a taste of presence, it's kind of like a favorite dish. You want to come back and have it again, and that's what I hope the book will do for everyone that reads it.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, I think you're right when you say that everybody has trauma because we're all just going through life and trying to find love, trying to be loved, trying to be seen. And there's this process that you have to be educated and then you have to get a good job and then you have to have money.
Right.
And there's all this materialism. What do you think about that in regards to society? I know this isn't really what the book is about, but I'd love to get your perspective because you're talking about going inside. And do you now have a different perspective about like the big screen TV or this type of car?
You know what I've learned is that one of the whole facility of consciousness and perspective is distinguishing one thing from another. I mean, if you really take it all apart and get down to a base level, the way we go through life is, oh, that's a tree, that's a flower, we distinguish things, and and then we make judgments about those things we distinguish. She looks like an interesting person. He doesn't. I don't think I'd like him. When I was a senior executive, I'm embarrassed to say I would interview other people for vice president roles, and I'd make a decision in 30 seconds whether or not they were going to fit or not. And that's ridiculous. And so, what I've learned through this process is I've become a lot less judgmental. I'm an opinionated person. I'm not, milk toast. I have ideas about politics and economics, and just like everybody else. But what I've found as I go through life is I work hard at just watching what is going on without passing judgment on it. And it's a part of being, because as soon as I start judging, what am I doing? I've switched from being to being in my head. And our heads typically aren't our friends. So I don't know if I answered your question, Lisa, but I think what this has taught me, what the practices have taught me, is to be more accepting. And personally, I write this in the book. My personal belief, and this will sound strange to people, I think acceptance is a superpower. And I think if a person, because as soon as you can gain some facility with acceptance, and by acceptance, I mean not even wishing things were different. I mean, full acceptance. One first level of acceptance is, okay, I can take this and continue to function. That's a pretty surface level of acceptance. A deeper level of acceptance is to accept this, to realize I'm about life rather than life being about me, and to not wish for it to be different. And when one gains that level of acceptance, circumstance loses its power over us. And how liberating can that is that? I mean, think of the
Yeah.
problems you feel in your heart and in your head, and the problems you see in the world. And if we can just say, okay, acceptance is not acquiescence. I mean, there's things that I'm very opinionated about that I work to change, but as I'm working to change them, I'm also accepting that things are as they are right now. So
Yes, 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 yes. And if that the book, reading the book is going to help us get towards that, I think that's for everybody. I think everybody wants that.
I think they do too. And this will sound funny. It may sound egotistical, but I've read the book about a dozen times. For those out there, and there may not be many who have written the book, first you have to proofread it and write it. Then you have to read it about 5 times in the publishing process, which can be kind of arduous. But I've read it another half a dozen times beyond that. You know why? It's because I'm using it to help me. It sounds weird, if I'm the author, well, why should I need to read it? But it reminds me, in my own practices of, their importance, the importance of prioritizing them, and the importance of, don't do as I say, do as I am, is to be that present person. And I've got a long, long way to go to be the person I really, to be as equanimous, if that's a word, that I would like to be.
It is a word.
Yeah.
Equanimity. Yes,
Equanimity.
absolutely.
I mispronounced it, but right, right. That's what I meant.
Well, um, I mean, I think that everyone should get this book. It's beautifully written, and it's it's structured in a way that it's in sections, and it has questions that make you think and take it even a step further in while you're going through it. And it's not overly long. It's actually a great size, and you can read it more than once. You can share it with your friends, and you can practice all of the things. There's many, many tools in here that you offer, and you tell it in a story, which makes it digestible, if that makes sense.
Oh no, thank you. That's well, the chapters, I wrote the chapters perfectly. There's not a lot of, one of the things that frustrates me about books, and I'm an avid reader, is on nonfiction books, the first 40 pages will introduce an interesting idea. And then the author drones on for another 300 pages just because the publisher, you need to have something that's thick enough to hold, right? And I thought, when I write this book, I'm going to, Winston Churchill said if I had more time, I would have given a shorter speech. And I thought about that
Oh, I
Winston
love that.
quote. I thought, I'm going to make this book as compact and as tight as I can, but understandable so people can take the practices in bite-sized chunks. It's a rare chapter. It's over 3 or 4 pages, but I've been told they're a little dense in the way, not dense in terms of hard to understand, but dense in terms of being thoughtful. And so I hope that really helps people. That's my goal.
Yes, yes.
We don't get rich
And
writing books unless we're Stephen King or something. So
that's true. That's true. And that's another thing that I think is very honorable is that you've taken your heartache and all of the things that you and your wife and your family have gone through, and you've shared it. And that's very brave and courageous in order to help other people with literally no no reward other than you're serving and helping to make the world a better place. So kudos to you. It's
thank you.
lovely. I think you've done a great job, and your story is fabulous. And I want to continue to follow you just because I think we can all learn a lot from you. And as of today, the ebook is available for the next 3 days on Kindle for 99 cents.
Yay!
Yay!
I want to get as many eyes on it as possible, and I was really excited that Clipston Publishing decided to make that offer because hopefully now more people will get a chance to read it and benefit from it. So that's
Absolutely.
the goal.
Yes. Yes. Well, thanks for today, Tim. I really appreciate it. And go get the book.
Thanks, Lisa. It's been great.